Hello, welcome back to another segment of Bold Predictions. It's the segment on my YouTube channel where I try and predict the scores of NFL games. We missed last week. I did not do a very good job of uploading and recording a video for that. So I'm back on kind of schedule this week. I am recording and uploading a little bit later than normal. It is Saturday as of me recording this right now and very likely uploading it to YouTube. So to the future me, when I sit back and watch this, try to be better at uploading stuff and being consistent. That's just a reminder for me. But also I feel like something we can all use in our everyday life. Just kind of affirmation and a reminder that when we say we're going to do things or stick to schedules, try to stick to it as much as possible because it does help kind of in the long run when you're able to be consistent and you're able just to follow your flow of the everyday life. So there's a little bit of affirmation for you this morning because it is morning right now. In the meantime, however, we're going to get right into some bold predictions. I'll kind of go over some of my predictions from last week. I did make all these predictions, full disclosure, on Wednesday before Thursday Night Football. So we'll dive into that as well for this week's predictions. So without further ado, let's get right in. Share the screen so you can see what I'm about to talk about here. And there we go. Bold predictions. Kind of week 7, Thursday night football from last week. It was Steelers versus Bengals. I picked the Steelers to win. They obviously did not. Close game though. Battle of the 40-year-old between Aaron Rodgers and Joe Flacco. So that's cool. Just a few other games here. I did very well last week. My overall record was 12-4. Rams versus Jaguars had Rams. Eagles and Vikings went with the Eagles. Patriots versus Titans. I picked the Patriots, obviously. Panthers versus Jets. I picked the Panthers a bit hesitantly, and they did win, but not as much as I would have liked. Dolphins versus Browns. I did go with the Dolphins because I didn't think that they were going to be that bad or Mike McDaniel will be that bad. Turns out I was wrong. They were that bad. And I don't know how to feel about the Dolphins anymore. Saints versus Bears, obviously went with the Bears. Raiders versus Chiefs, I did pick the Chiefs. Colts versus Chargers, I went with the Colts. They still have the best overall record in the NFL right now, and we'll talk more about the Chargers later. Giants versus Broncos, I did go with the Giants. I'm sorry, I went with the Broncos there. Close game too. I don't know if the Broncos really deserved to win that game, but they did. Packers versus Cardinals. I went with the Packers. I just like what they're doing right now. Commanders versus Cowboys. I did go with the Cowboys here, even though they lost to the Panthers last week. I just felt that they were in for a bit of redemption, and they brought CeeDee Lamb back. So that obviously proved to work in their favor. Sunday night football was Falcons versus 49ers. I did go with the 49ers. They returned George Kittle. Matt Jones has been playing at a very good level right now. So I didn't know if the Falcons would have that consistency with their quarterback. So I'm glad I went with the 49ers. Monday Night Football, Bucks versus Lions. I did pick the Buccaneers. They lost. And then the other doubleheader was Texans versus Seahawks. Went with the Seahawks because I just liked what I saw from them right now rather than the Texans. So 12-4. That is tied for my best overall record when it comes to predictions right now. So I redeemed myself from week 6. Week 6 we were 10-6. Week 7, 12-4. So I'm on the right track. So on to week 8. Thursday night football was Vikings versus Chargers. I went with the Chargers here. I know that they are kind of a little bit inconsistent right now when it comes to like having good wins and then not so good wins and then not so good losses. But I went with the Chargers for one reason and one reason only, and that's because I felt that they were due for a win. They were at home. The Vikings were not starting JJ McCarthy once more. They were starting Carson Wentz. And even though Carson Wentz is experienced and he's played in the NFL for quite a few years, I just didn't know how he would fare against the LA Chargers, and obviously Chargers looking for a win after last week's loss. So I'm glad I went with the Chargers. It was 50-50. I just had to almost do like a coin flip and went with LA and had to trust my gut on that one. So it did work out in my favor, which is why it's bold because I got it right. Other games here, Dolphins versus Falcons tomorrow. I'm going with the Falcons. I just don't know how the Dolphins can redeem themselves from the season that they have had. I really don't. You're 1-6 right now. The Falcons, even though they had a loss last week, it was still to a really good 49ers team. They kept it pretty close. So, and I know that the Falcons are better than the Dolphins when it comes to the overall like chemistry and what they are doing, but just not on the field, but off the field as well. Tua is just having the worst season of his career thus far. I don't know if I can even say worst season because there's so many other factors alluding to why the Dolphins are 1-6. Losing your wide receiver for the season, Tyreek Hill, probably doesn't help that much. But something needs to change with the Dolphins. I don't know if that is benching your quarterback, who is obviously proven that he's not playing well. I don't know if it's, bringing in someone new who can find that team chemistry. I really don't know. So I'm going with the Falcons here. I do think something needs to change in Miami, and it needs to change as soon as possible because if they lose again, they're sitting at 1-7. And there's been one head coach so far who's been fired this NFL season. And I absolutely believe that if Mike McDaniel loses this game again, he is on that chopping block. Next up, we have the Bears versus the Ravens. I'm going with the Ravens. They had a bye week last week. Obviously, their week 6 loss was not great. They lost by quite a lot of points, but they're rested. They're coming back. This is one of my bold predictions this week, and I'm saying that the Ravens are going to beat the Bears. I don't know why. I just feel like the Ravens are due for a win. And if you bring back Lamar Jackson, that's a very experienced quarterback, more experienced than Caleb Williams. And I feel like he can do a little bit more and can throw the ball just a better, being as experienced as he is, rather than a second-year quarterback. So that was my logic and thinking. Jets versus Bengals. I'm going with the Bengals here. The Jets still have yet to win a football game this year. And if the Jets go 0-8 so far, then I think there's another head coach on the chopping block in terms of keeping his job. I don't know if they will actually fire him mid-season, even if they are winless. He is brand new. It's his first year with the New York Jets, but I'm not willing to give so much grace because you should still know how to coach. I understand that the Jets have lost some close games that were right in their hands. They did bench Justin Fields in the second half last week against the Panthers. So there's one change that they made, benching your starting quarterback in favor for another. I think the Dolphins could take a few tips from them in terms of just trying to find something new and finding something that works. But the Bengals, even though they're without their starting quarterback for a while, they've been consistent enough that I feel safe picking them. So we'll see what happens there. Bills versus Panthers. The Bills are coming off of a bye week this week, or from last week. They are on the road against the Panthers, but my brother kept saying that Carolina is good, and people underestimate just how good they really are. And I had to sit and think about that for a minute here. I do think that the Panthers are better than they were last season. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. Now, I am a Panthers fan. I don't know if I'm willing to go as far as saying that they're good and people don't realize how good they are. Maybe Bryce Young has better weapons to throw the ball to. Maybe he has improved in terms of accuracy. But this is the same quarterback who did lose at the beginning of the season and lost by quite a bit. This is still the same quarterback who is throwing interceptions and just making rookie mistakes, even though he's not a rookie anymore. So he has room to grow, obviously. Everybody has room to grow. I'm still not sold on the Panthers yet, but I am going with the Bills because they're coming off of a bye week, losing 2 straight games. I feel like they'll come in with a chip on their shoulder. And obviously, I'm going to trust that a veteran such as Josh Allen, who has played in some very high stake games in the playoffs, will be able to lead that team to victory rather than a third year or fourth year quarterback who is still learning the ropes of the NFL. And Bryce Young is also dealing with a high ankle sprain and is doubtful. So there's another reason why I'm going to pick the Bills. 49ers versus Texans. I'm going with the 49ers. I know that Brock Purdy is out yet again dealing with that toe injury. I honestly think that is smart. And here is why. Now, I hear people say that Brock's job is on the line because of how good Mac Jones is playing. And there's where I'm going to stop you. And there's your answer to that. Mac Jones is playing great as a backup. He was brought into San Francisco as a backup quarterback, and he has said as much as he did when he does his post game interviews. And they asked him, do you think that there's a chance you could be the starting quarterback? His answer has always been, this is Brock's team. I was just brought here to play backup to Brock. Is it great that Mac Jones is playing at this high of a level? Absolutely. He didn't get a fair chance in New England with the Patriots. He was the backup last season for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, both teams are doing pretty good this season, but now he's really evolving. I think Kyle Shanahan is doing a really great job with him. I think the quarterbacks coach in San Francisco is doing a really good job of him. He is young still. And when you have a young quarterback, when you have a young starting quarterback and you have a young backup, that is like the best case scenario for NFL teams at this day and age. Because even though some of the veteran quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers and Joe Flacco, who have been in the league for many years, have plenty of experience under their belts, there is age to consider here. They are both in their 40s. You're not going to be as mobile as you were once in your 20s than in your 40s. There's also higher risk for injury and stuff going wrong. I think we can say the same thing about Carson Wentz too when it comes to age. But these young quarterbacks, when you can develop them, when you can work with them and find out where their strengths are, where their insecurities and their inconsistencies are, and blend those together, then you're looking at a team with a good quarterback, a good backup, throw in the running backs, the tight ends, the wide receivers in there for offense. Same goes for defense too. You are looking at the best case scenario, not only for your team in the moment, but the best case scenario for your team in the future. And that's what we are seeing in San Francisco right now. Mac Jones is showing that he can play at a high level, that he can play at a good level. And the 49ers are not in as much trouble anymore when you have a good backup quarterback who is still giving your team wins. Once you return your starting quarterback, maybe Brock will be a little bit rusty when he returns. Maybe he's practicing right now. I don't know the full details of that, but they're keeping their playoff hopes alive, is what I'll say with Mac Jones. And that's why I'm going to trust that they're going to bring that energy with them to Houston against the Texans. Browns versus Patriots. I'm going with the Patriots here. I know that they are doing very good this season, better than they were last season at least. And they are one of the top 2 teams in the AFC East right now, alongside Buffalo. This is the same Patriots team who did beat Buffalo a few weeks ago. And with the Browns too, it's just I think it's just a little inconsistency issue when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, which is why I'm going with the Patriots, who are at home too. Giants versus Eagles here. I'm going with the Eagles. The Giants did beat the Eagles a couple weeks ago, but this Eagles team has now found the missing ingredients, so to speak. They are showing that they can be explosive on offense if you just don't hesitate. They're showing that they can be explosive on defense. And this is going to be a redemption game for them. I feel like losing to the Giants was a little bit inexcusable. That never should have happened, especially when this Philadelphia Eagles team is the same team who went to the Super Bowl last year and won the whole thing. So there's going to be redemption there, which is why I'm going with the Eagles. And I feel like it could either be a blowout or it could be a rarely close game again, in which I feel like we should then have a talk about why this Eagles team looks not necessarily bad, but doesn't look like they are fully putting the puzzle together if they lose. Bucks versus Saints. I'm going with the Buccaneers here. The Saints are not just good as the Buccaneers right now. And that's that. That's one. Bucks, Titans versus Colts. I feel like that has no need for explanation here. I'm going with the Indianapolis Colts because one team is 6-1, the other team is 1-6. Cowboys versus Broncos. Now, this is a game that is truly, really, truly 50-50 for me. I'm going with the Broncos. I know that they barely beat the Giants last week. I get that. I know that the Cowboys blew out the Commanders. I also get that. But this is a Broncos team who has been in very close games and could easily be undefeated right now had 2 field goals gone their way at the start of the season. They allowed a game-winning field goal in one game, and then another game-winning field goal in another game to the opposing teams. So when you lose 2 games to game-winning field goals, obviously they had that game in their bags. I will admit that they did have one of those games in the bag. So, but if they don't allow those field goals, or if the kicker misses the field goals, they could be undefeated right now. And that's how good they are. They did beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Cowboys did not beat the Eagles the first time around at the first game of the season. But again, that was when we were really starting to see what these teams would look like. I remember I picked the Eagles to win that game against the Cowboys, and I was right. But it wasn't a blowout like I was expecting. And when it comes to the Cowboys, they are consistent enough, but they are very inconsistent on the field. Off the field, when you look at their record, I believe they are 3-2-1. I know they tied with the Packers. Maybe they're 2-3-1. I forget, but they're either three. I think they're 3-3-1. Okay, I know they've won 3 games, they've lost 3 games, and they've tied another game. So when you look at the off the field, they are consistent. They are sitting at around 500 at the moment. On the field, however, they are inconsistent, and they are very inconsistent because you have a high level offense and a low playing defense. What does that look like? Dak is playing at a high level right now. He's playing the best football that I have ever seen him play the last 9 years he's been in Dallas. He's elevating this offense, and he did so without his number one wide receiver. George Pickens is proving that he is a really good wide receiver to throw the ball to and make plays. The Cowboys picking him up in the postseason during like the trades and whatnot was a good pickup addition, because I don't know how the Cowboys would have looked like if they didn't have CeeDee Lamb and they didn't have George Pickens. We could be having a very different discussion about the Cowboys right now. But Dak is making plays with his arms. He's running the ball better. He is finding his receivers. The turnovers are down from where they were at the season last year. Granted, Dak did suffer a season-ending injury last season, so there's not much to go off there. However, I do feel like he's playing at an MVP level right now. He Last I checked, he was leading the NFL in yards, like overall yardage when it like passing yards, that stuff. So he's playing at a very high level, and that deserves applause and recognition. We should applaud that for having that chip on his shoulder yet again when it comes to the Cowboys and leading this offense and making big plays that keep the Cowboys in the game. Now, defensively, I don't know what's happening with the defense. I don't know if it's player issues. I don't know if it's a coaching issue. I don't know if it's a defensive coordinator issue, but they are very inconsistent. They still cannot stop the run. They still cannot bring, enough coverage to make stops on plays. They did look a little bit better last week against the Commanders, but again, the Commanders' offensive line and their offense the is not really good in terms of where teams rank. I do believe they are middle or lower of the pack there. And then with the Commanders' defensive line as well, not really up on top either. So even though the Cowboys were able to stop the run and make plays, it's still the Commanders, and it's still not enough to show me that they are improving and that they can be consistent on a regular basis. And with the Broncos too, the Broncos offense with Bo Nix is a powerhouse. There's nothing wrong with saying that. He's young too, but he is a powerhouse. I feel like the battle of those quarterbacks is going to be one that is going to be exciting. We should be excited to see Denver. We should be excited to see the Cowboys when it comes to their offense. With the Cowboys defense, however, they're going to need to step up and make big plays. I don't know if they are capable of doing that. And like I said, I don't know if it's a player issue. I don't know if something needs to change with the players' mindsets. I don't know if it's something that Matt Uberflus, their defensive coordinator, can fix and be willing to fix for them. But they need to show that they are in it to win it. I have not seen that at all this season. And it was very evident that they can be and will be inconsistent when they played the Carolina Panthers and lost that game. So, and speaking of players, some of their best defensive players are not playing great. Losing Micah Parsons was rough. I get that. I think every Cowboy feels the loss of Micah Parsons, and receiving Kenny Clark in the trade, I don't know what much he has brought to their defensive line, if I'm being totally honest. But there's another player that we don't talk about enough, and that's their cornerback, Trayvon Diggs, who in the past few years has been their number one guy when it comes to man coverage and getting interceptions and returning them quite a few yards. He has yet to have an interception this year. I don't know where that Trayvon Diggs is, but they Cowboys need that version. Otherwise, they have a Super Bowl. Nah, I shouldn't say Super Bowl. That's a bit high. They have a playoff caliber offense. Do not have a playoff caliber defense. They do have a very good special teams unit. Brandon Aubrey is still the same guy that he was last season with field goals, but I don't know. I just want to see just the slightest change in Dallas that shows me, that shows fans, and that shows the sports world that they are willing to make changes and that they do have their eyes set on the playoffs, which is the goal every year. And if the Cowboys somehow do happen to make the playoffs, if the rest of their season goes their way, barring any other significant injuries, then it's time for that discussion of whether or not Dak can win a playoff game or if it's going to be a game that ultimately all falls on the defense. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. Thanks for listening to my rant about the Cowboys. But Sunday Night Football, and just to reiterate, I did choose the Broncos. Sunday Night Football is Packers versus Steelers. Aaron Rodgers plays his former team that he played for 18 seasons, I believe. I'm going with the Steelers. It is a bit, I know he doesn't think of it as a revenge game, I think of it as a revenge game. I'm going with the Steelers. Again, chip on their shoulder from losing last week. Even though the Packers have Micah Parsons, even though the Packers have Jordan Love, the the Cardinals and Packers still kept it a game for a few minutes there. And with the Steelers, however, when you have Aaron Rodgers, I just feel like he wants to win at home in Pittsburgh against his former team. So that's Sunday Night Football. I'm going with Steelers. And then finally, Monday Night Football is Commanders versus Chiefs. The Chiefs have turned it around some. We see the old Patrick Mahomes again. I don't know what Jaden Daniels' status is like. He did sustain an injury in last week's game against Dallas. So, with the Chiefs at home too in Kansas City, I'm just going and rolling with the Kansas City Chiefs. So, there's my predictions for this week. Thanks for listening and watching. I try to do bold predictions every week when I remember to upload, but hopefully, I think the theme for this week's predictions is redemption. Redemption for some of these teams who lost last week, redemption for some teams who are playing each other against, such as the Eagles and the Giants. I think this is also a little bit of redemption for the Dallas Cowboys if they can redeem themselves from losing to good teams at the start of the season. They did have a little bit of an easy schedule there for the last couple of weeks between the Jets, the Panthers, and maybe the Commanders. I still think the Commanders are good, but the Cowboys had the Jets and the Panthers, two easier teams, two not so good teams. Commanders, they did get tested a little bit, but we saw that blowout win. But now it's time to play a tougher team for the Dallas Cowboys again with the Denver Broncos. So Dak needs to be at his A game. That defense needs to have an A plus 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 game. And special teams, I'm not quite worried about there. And also Sunday Night Football redemption for redemption, revenge, however you like to view it, for the Packers and the Steelers. I also think that the Bills are looking to redeem themselves a bit, coming off of two straight losses, getting rested with that bye week, and then traveling to play at Carolina. And same with the Ravens, looking to coming off of their bye week and looking to add to their season wins. I think they've only won 2 games so far. So maybe we can talk more about that in a later episode. And obviously, the Dolphins have to redeem themselves at this point. I don't know what else there is to say about that. But here we go. Bold predictions for the week. We'll be back next week for some more. Thanks for listening and watching. Bye.